Chairman. Thanks for being here today. It's pretty well known where our chairman stands on this. His worldwide view, pretty clear that he believes you guys are setting drug prices, and it's all about corporate greed. I'm a true believer of capitalism, and I believe that we have the best healthcare system in the world. Problem is, we've got the federal government involved in it, and it's not implemented the way probably it should be. That being said, I just got a few questions here on a couple of things. Mr. Davis, can you explain me something? The Biden administration has two huge priorities: dictate prices of prescription drugs, specifically small molecule drugs, and cure cancer. Can you walk me through how those priorities might be in direct contradiction of each other?
Well, Senator, and I think what you're referring to is what is called the pill penalty.
That's correct.
Underneath the IRA, and what that does is effectively says that at 9 years post your first approval, your price or your drug will be negotiated, and if it's a small molecule, it's 13. If it's a large, the issue that raises is that it disfavors small molecule development. And the reality of it is, if you look across the majority of cancer treatments, they are still small molecules. And as Chris pointed out earlier, the development of cancer drugs usually starts in a phase starting at the very most sickest patient, the last stage of disease, and then you work forward into earlier stages of disease where, in fact, you can start to maybe talk about cure. To do those studies in early stage disease, often called adjuvant or neoadjuvant care, and we have 9 approvals in that space, those studies can take 7 to 9 years to do. So obviously, if at 9 years, I have to significantly reduce the price of that drug to a point that it is potentially, at basically no profit, my incentive to do those follow-on studies is not there. And that is our worry, that if you look at cancer care, you're going to see patients suffer because we can't get to really talking about cure, which is in earlier stages of disease. I'd also point out, you didn't ask about Alzheimer's and neuroscience diseases, but most CNS diseases also require small molecules because large molecules, biologics, can't penetrate the blood-brain barrier. So we are disincentivizing some of the largest areas of sickness and chronic need in our society through that pill penalty you referred to.
Thank you, Mr. Boehner. We hear a lot about how healthcare costs are ridiculous high. I think all of us would agree to that to some degree. I want to peel back the onion here a little bit. Today we're being led to believe that these costs are due to corporate greed. I want to know if we're going to talk about some additional drivers of healthcare costs. When the federal government dumped trillions into various industries during COVID, we upended our markets and drove prices through the roof. You know, when I talk to healthcare folks back in Alabama, labor cost is one huge problem. But there are other costs, including supplies and raw materials. What impact are these having on the drug development and high drug cost?
Certainly, Senator, when we look at the cost basis for us doing what we do as a company, which is to bring forward new medicines for patients, we have to factor in all of those costs. I'll give you an example. In cellular therapy, which is really transforming very late-line hematologic diseases, these are very complex medicines. You're taking patient cells, manufacturing them, and re-engineering them to really target and hone in on cancer cells, and then you re-inject them in the patients. This is really a first-generation technology. Unfortunately, it has very high labor costs because this is one that's very manual. It's a multi-step process to manufacture these products. Their transportation costs, their raw material costs, all of those factors go into a cost of these first-generation medicines. Now, we're very focused on trying to innovate to get to a second and third generation quickly so we can bring those costs down, not only because it's important for us to be able to funnel additional research into development, but also so that we can bring ultimately the cost down to patients. So they are absolutely a factor, Senator.
Thank you. Mr. Rado, I'm going to ask you this with your accent in mind. We'll probably have a tough time. But I know you're probably aware in 2021, you weren't the CEO, I don't think, at that time, but the Biden administration announced a mandate that U.S. troops and personnel must take the COVID vaccine in order to serve in the military. Are you familiar with that?
I'm familiar, sir. Thank you.
Are you aware that more than 8,400 troops were kicked out of the military for declining to take the COVID vaccine? These were mostly young, healthy Americans for whom COVID risk was low. Are you aware of that?
No, I was not aware of that, sir.
Thank you. Did you or did anyone at Johnson & Johnson encourage the Biden administration to mandate this COVID vaccine to the military? Are you familiar with that?
We did not, sir.
Okay. How much did Johnson & Johnson benefit financially from the administration's military COVID vaccine mandate? Could you have any kind of guess to that?
Our effort in the COVID vaccine that we collaborated with the government, it was a time of a global emergency, so we thought that as a healthcare company that cares for patients, we needed to collaborate with the U.S. government on that. Was entirely non-for-profit.
Do you think the soldiers who were expelled from the military was the right thing to do, and should they be reinstated?
I was not aware of this situation, sir. I am not aware of these circumstances, so I cannot comment on that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.